Welcome back to the Ardent Gunner for the next step in our journey in understanding how guns work. In the last episode, we established what ordnance is, the barrel and breech assembly that does the actual work of firing a projectile. But ordnance on its own is useless. It needs to be supported, transported, aimed and stabilised when it fires. That's the job of the carriage or the mounting. Today we will discuss the difference between the two and what they do for the artillery piece. That difference is where we start. Across both types, a carriage or a mounting can be split into two parts: the basic structure, which might combine the trails, wheels, the base of the gun on which it can rotate, and the superstructure, which provides movement for the ordnance in terms of elevation, traverse, recoil and run out. Its main components are the cradle and the saddle, including the sights. But what is the difference between the two? Well, first to the carriage. A carriage is a wheeled support system designed to do three things: move the ordnance from place to place, absorb the recoil when it fires, and hold it in a stable, aimable position while it does so. The key components are the trail or trails at the rear, which provide the stable base, the wheels and axle, which enable movement, and the superstructure that holds the ordnance in its cradle and houses the recoil system. We'll go inside all of those in future episodes. The carriage is built around a fundamental tension. It needs to be light enough to be moved quickly, towed by horses or a vehicle, whilst also being heavy and stable enough to remain in position while firing. Everything about a carriage design is a negotiation between those two demands. On the other hand, a mounting is a different solution to the same basic problem. Where a carriage prioritises mobility, a mounting prioritises stability. It fixes the ordnance to a surface, whether that's the ground, a concrete emplacement, a ship's deck, or a platform that can be converted for movement. Mountings come in several forms. Platform mountings sit on a base plate or cruciform platform set into the ground, the standard solution for anti-aircraft guns, which need to engage targets in any direction at any elevation. Pivot mountings allow the ordnance to rotate around a central fixed point, common in naval and coastal artillery, and siege or emplacement mountings fix heavy ordnance into prepared positions, and these are usually broken down for transport and assembled on site over hours or even days. The priority with a mounting is all-round traverse and resistance to the forces of recoil. These are not weapons designed for rapid relocation. They're designed to fight from a position. The distinction matters, but it isn't always clean, and the best example of that is the 3.7-inch quick-firing anti-aircraft gun, or the famous German 88mm anti-aircraft / anti-tank gun. In travel, they have wheels. Indeed, you could be forgiven for thinking that makes it a carriage. But in action, those wheels are raised clear of the ground, or indeed removed entirely, and the gun comes down onto a four-leg cruciform platform which anchors it firmly to the earth. In action, both these guns fire from a mounting. The wheels are just how that mounting got to that position. So why these differences? Every carriage and mounting design, from the simplest two-wheeled field piece to the heaviest siege howitzer, is the answer to the same question: how much stability do you need, and how much mobility can you afford to sacrifice to get it? This is the critical question of artillery design, and one we will go into much greater detail on the next video in the series. For now, let's take a look at a few examples from Britain in World War I that cover this span. At the carriage end of the scale, the quick-firing 18-pounder. The standard British field gun of the entire war, this formed the backbone of the Royal Artillery from Mons to the Armistice. A pole trail on the early marks, with a box trail being experimented with and introduced fully in the post-war years. Towed by a 6-horse team and fired from its wheeled carriage. This was fast to deploy and fast to move. The 18-pounder is the archetypal British field carriage, and understanding it is understanding the design logic that produced the 25-pounder a generation later. Alongside it served the 4.5-inch quick-firing howitzer, and this pairing is instructive. The two weapons equipped the same divisions, normally in the same regiments, and their carriages had to solve different problems. The 18-pounder was a flat trajectory gun with a relatively consistent recoil force. The 4.5-inch fired at much higher elevations, up to 45 degrees, and the carriage had to absorb those forces across a far wider range of barrel positions. So the same basic carriage principle, but different demands. Then to an example of a mounting, the 9.2-inch breech loading howitzer. It broke down into several separate loads for transport, ordnance, superstructure and platform, and was assembled in a prepared emplacement before firing. In action, it sat on that emplacement platform. The wheels that brought it into position were not part of how it fought. So we have the full spread, the pole trail on the quick-firing 18-pounder, only allowing for that flat trajectory engagement. Then you've got the 4.5-inch howitzer with its box trail giving it more room to deal with that far wider range of elevations that it would be engaging on. And then you have that mounting for the 9.2-inch howitzer absorbing the massive recoil forces that it would have to deal with in order to operate correctly. A brief word on gun shields because they belong here rather than later in the series. The shield is a structural part of an artillery piece, attached normally to the superstructure and sometimes to the basic structure. It can move with the ordnance, allowing it to elevate within an aperture. Its purpose is protection from small arms fire and shell splinters. They wouldn't stop larger rounds. These would be too heavy and impractical. But in the open, it meaningfully improves crew survivability. Not every gun has one. Heavy pieces typically relied on the emplacement itself for cover, and the shield adds weight, which is never free on a carriage where every kilogram had to be justified against mobility. The 17-pounder's large prominent shield is a good example of a design that went further than most, sized to give the crew meaningful protection in its direct fire anti-tank role, where they were often working in the open at close range. These have died out on modern guns. The increased weight is not worth it anymore, with longer ranges and increased lethality of modern threats making them ineffective. So, a carriage is a wheeled mobile support system designed to travel, deploy and fight. A mounting is a fixed or platform-based system designed above all else to be stable. These exist on a spectrum, not in separate categories. And we haven't mentioned self-propelled guns yet, one we will come to down the tracks. In the next episode, we go inside the carriage and how it actually works. The trail, the superstructure, the recoil system, and the stability equation that governs the whole design. Hopefully, I will see you there. Thank you for watching. This has been the Ardent Gunner.